Good evening, everybody. Okay, so I'm like Maria, so let's try that again. Good evening, everybody. All right, thank you. How are you feeling tonight? Let's try again. How are you feeling tonight? Okay, good. Even if you're feeling medium, I hope after this evening, after my lecture, but also all of the performances, you'll feel better. Thank you to Maria for the introduction and for actually hosting this whole thing, and for the three wise men. And you almost gave your lecture, the lecture for me, actually. So you do need a woman, though. I'm gonna just lay that out there. Yeah. So you just saw a preview from my documentary, Ga terug en haal het, or Remember What You Forgot, that I and many others worked on together. So that was Ahmed. Some of you might not have completely understood what was going on, so I'm going to explain a bit. So Ahmed is the friendliest and most erudite activist I've ever seen. So he and his neighbors are resisting the gentrification of Rotterdam-Zuid, a working-class neighborhood where a majority of people with migrant background live. As you can see, he is forced to watch as the homes around him crumble back to dust and to see his neighborhood change to accommodate the new, rich, and often white inhabitants. He put himself through so much. So I asked him, why? What is the point of your resistance? It's the same question Martin Luther King Jr. wrote about in the Birmingham jail letter that inspired today's lecture. Why is resistance or civil disobedience, as these are interchangeable to me, necessary? Why do we, or should we, do it? So I wouldn't dare pretend to know the exact answer for Martin Luther King, but I can, however, make the case for resistance inspired by him, as most of us that are in search of a better world are. Why resistance? It's what I've based a good portion of my life's work on. Now, it sounds like I'm really old, but I just started kind of young. Firstly, what I've learned is that to be able to achieve anything in this world, you must know who you are. So some of you might know who I am, but it's still bad manners to not properly introduce myself. I am Clarice Massa Dekwe Gagard. I come from a lineage of warriors, survivors, shamans, and healers originating from deep in the lustrous rainforest and rolling hills of Liberia. From the Va, my mother's people, and the Bassa, my father's. As the legend tells it, my grandfather was a fierce dragon king who taught my father what it meant to be a ruler and survivor. My father studied in the United States, where he had to deal with segregation and xenophobia. My mother fled alone from the war, and my father, to the United States, where I was born, to create a new life for herself. My sister fled from the second part of the war with me and made a home for us here in the Netherlands. I am a survivor, truth teller, seeker, the found, a flawed human being and divine creation. I am a fighter, a lover, a creator. Who are you? Now, we are all living in this age of resistance, revolution, change together. You can tell by the movements that have not only arisen, but are being continued, as there's usually nothing new under the sun, only different ways to view it and other levels to it. I'm thinking of those who fight against neoliberal white supremacy, which includes Islamophobia, Asian hate, and anti-Semitism. It is not enough to call it racism, because it's about a whole system and structure that upholds the value of one life whilst it devalues another, those of Black, brown, and other people of color of the majority world. I'm thinking of those who are fighting for climate justice, not just groups like Extinction Rebellion or Fridays for Future, who, by the way, get so demonized that their punishment for violating art in a pursuit to save the earth, whether you believe it a violation or not, is extremely disproportionate to other similar crimes. I'm also thinking of those looking to abolish Shell, a corporation that not only has consciously been one of the world's leading polluters for decades, but is also a major violator of human rights. What they've done in Nigeria alone should be considered crimes against humanity. I'm thinking of the indigenous stewards of land whose old ways have been ridiculed, but who are the ones we can learn from the most when attempting to restore and heal our planet and keep her inhabitable for us. I'm thinking of the disability justice activists who are quite literally making the future more accessible, which eventually benefits and levels the playing field for us all. I'm thinking of those fighting for the right to exist, be, and love as they are, whilst under attack, the violence at Colorado Springs being proof of that. I'm thinking of teachers and healthcare workers who have taken to the streets to ask for what they're worth in this country, where we value money more than our own well-being and those who provide it. I'm thinking of brave resistors worldwide, in Ukraine, Haiti, Afghanistan, Iran, as the world is still watching how one person, Mahsa Jina Amini, can ignite a revolution. Jin Jihan Asadi. Resistance leading to revolution is abound. Yet it's important to know that these are not isolated incidents. To paraphrase writer, poet, academic, and visionary Audre Lorde, revolution is rarely a one-time event. This is why it's also important to know where we come from and to reckon or reconcile with the past, as you cannot be fully present nor move forward if you haven't retrieved what you have lost, forgotten, or what was forcefully taken from you, Sankofa. That is perhaps one of the reasons why the Dutch government has chosen to apologize for some of the atrocities in the past, hopefully working their way up to those in the present. It is a major step forward in a struggle for liberation, but like in any kind of relationship, an apology must be followed by action. Some sort of restoration of the harm doing of the past or change of behavior in the future. Or else it's just a political performance to be absolved of guilt without actually taking responsibility or accountability. Rumor has it that the Great Apology will take place on the 19th of December. Nobody knows why exactly. What I find interesting is that in Suriname, some organizations have demanded a different date. Kitty Kotti, for example. But also that King Willem-Alexander be the one to apologize. And they've expressed that they'd rather not receive the apology from one of the government officials who himself is a descendant of enslaved people. Again, this is what you risk happening when genuine gestures become political performances. The response of some of these Afro-Caribbean organizations is an example of how resistance, civil disobedience can reside in the grandest of movements, but also the smallest of refusals. At times, just resting, shout out Trisha Hersey from the NAP ministry, can become resistance. Or anything that doesn't fit into the agenda of this capitalist, white supremacist, patriarchal, queer, transphobic, ableist, oppressive system. When your pain is rampant, sometimes even your joy becomes resistance. Yet, people often think that you must be 100% good, whatever that may mean, to resist or contribute to change. Or they adhere to the alle mensen deugen evangelie, I don't know how to translate that, which tells them that they're already good, so it makes them avoid individual responsibility. Those are both an oversimplification of what it means to be human. None of the great resistors, not even Martin Luther King Jr., were flawless human beings, nor should they be. That right is reserved for Queen Beyoncé and Queen Beyoncé alone. Shout out. We are all capable of great good and horrendous evil, depending on the context. Whether or not you can contribute to change is not about the performance of good by the individual, but about how the individual can contribute to the collective. You should, however, be willing to face your own human flaws and realize that despite or maybe because we're all flawed, you decide who you want to be and how you want to show up. This is also why I think there is a lot of resistance to true positive change. Because it asks of you not just to question your views, but who you are, how you are showing up in the world, and in which way you're contributing to its destruction or reimagining. People fear change because of what they think they're losing, which prevents them from seeing what there is to gain. Which is also where I believe the fear of woke comes from. I don't necessarily like adhering to labels. I would say I'm anti-oppression, pro-love, but the word woke stems from the Black community and means nothing more than the process of awareness around systemic and institutional justice issues. I guess if you're afraid of change because you're on the wrong side of it, being woke would scare you. However, that doesn't mean that there isn't a darker side to the struggle for justice. It is what some call cancel culture, but others with more insight would label accountability or call-out culture. Because we have no examples of what a just, kind, equal, and sustainable world would look like, we tend to mirror the same punitive systems in search of it. Practices that tell us one must adhere to certain unspoken rules, not like laws or when it concerns misconduct, or else be punished and penalized disproportionately for it. Sometimes done by people in the back who shout commands at others standing directly in the line of fire. This is something to unlearn, both in how we treat ourselves and how we treat others. The master's tool, as Lorde states, will never dismantle the master's house. Just as self-awareness without political awareness can become narcissism, so can political awareness without self-awareness easily turn into rigid self-righteousness. That is why I'm ultimately not impressed by who knows all of the right words, is the most vocal on issues of justice, who follows the new rules the best and checks all the boxes, because change is not about anything symptomatic or external. It is not a performance to get a reward like capitalism teaches us. It happens in us and radiates out to permeate all systems of oppression, if we want change to last, at least. True change tells us not just what you think should be in your mind, but what is present in your heart. In my documentary, I tried to answer the question if Black Lives Matter, one of the, if not the, largest anti-racism uprising worldwide ever, was a tipping point. I searched feverishly for answers in the Netherlands, Suriname, and Curaçao. By telling a story about Black lives and Black resistance that isn't centered in US narratives. I wanted us to remember our own memories, and not just those that are most prevalent in media and Western society. So I spoke to and depicted Marian Markelo, Rachel Winter, André Moses, Konrad Babel, André Reder, Ahmed Abdallaye, Tarim Vlag, Lulu Helder, Jean Henriques, Gina and Lucien Lavour, Ines Lim, Malik Mahmoud, Sensi Blindeling, and Dorenia Babel. Names of resistance fighters, mothers, fathers, artists, futurists, spiritualists, and change makers we should all make acquaintance with. And we should add more to the list that is already extensive, but not a part of our cultural archive, which makes us forget and doomed to repeat the same mistakes. The violence that Kick Out Zwarte Piet faced when they were in Staphorst, for example, was horrific, but not the first time in history something similar happened. And simultaneously, portraying Zwarte Piet is Zwart Verdriet in my documentary, who started these anti-Piet protests in 1996, also shows us that we have come a long way since then. At the end of my search, I realized the answers to my question, as with almost everything, reside within us. That we are the ones who decide what the tipping point is, depending on the action we take and the intentions that accompany our actions. But it also depends on how well we can deal with all of the wounds and pain that are inflicted on the turbulent and obstructive road to freedom. But I don't want to give away too much of the documentary. Has anyone seen the documentary? Hands? Oh, shame on you. Now you have to watch it. At the end of my search, I was also reminded of late revolutionary prophet of love, Bell Hooks, who tells us that healing must be a part of liberatory movements, love as a political act. Even in anger, love can dwell, if it is a rage that propels and not only destroys. In Love as a Practice of Freedom, she references King. I'm going to go a bit meta for a moment. She says, to heal our wounded body politics, we must reaffirm our commitment to a vision of what King referred to in the essay, Facing the Challenge of a New Age, as a genuine commitment to freedom and justice for all. My heart is uplifted when I read King's essay. I am reminded where true liberation leads us. It leads us beyond the resistance to transformation. King tells us that the end is reconciliation, the end is redemption, the end is the creation of the beloved community. The moment we choose to love, we begin to move against domination, against oppression. The moment we choose to love, we begin to move towards freedom, to act in ways that liberate ourselves and others. And that action is a testimony of love as a practice of freedom. Resistance is the gateway to transformation, as Hooks states, the transforming of the world. And another world is possible, as writer and thinker Arundhati Roy writes in An Ordinary Person's Guide to Empire. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. It can easily seem like resisting has nothing to do with you. But if I have learned anything in my life, career, whilst making this documentary, it is that the individual matters but does not exist separately from the collective. That there are different forms of resistance that lead to transformation, carried out by different people who are linked through all time and space. And that as certain as the stars in the skies linger before and after our existence, we are all responsible and connected in our desire for change, justice, self-determination, and love. And we can all have impact. We are but a drop in the grand scheme of things, but also we are a drop in the grand scheme of things. Nonviolent direct action seeks to create such a crisis and establish such creative tension that a community that has constantly refused to negotiate is forced to confront the issue. It seeks to dramatize the issue so that it can no longer be ignored. There is a type of constructive nonviolent tension that is necessary for growth. Martin Luther King Jr., Letter from the Birmingham Jail, 1963. This is something that was true in 1963 and remains true today in 2022. Because when in history have liberties that threaten the dominion of the elite, oppressive and dehumanizing systems ever been recognized when asked nicely? Those who resist do not see what they are losing because they are focused so much more on what there is to gain, and they remain inspired by the whispers of those possibilities, the promise of growth, change, and what we can create together. This is what has, does, and will propel those who strive for freedom in whichever way they can. Why resist? With all of this in mind, ask yourself, how the hell can I afford not to? Thank you.